Okay, so thank you all for coming and welcome to our third annual collaboration. This is a collaboration between the Belmont Pan Asian Coalition and the Belmont Chinese American Association. And these Meet the Candidate forums. These are our effort to make it possible for our members and also for the members of the public to meet the candidates for our local elections. Lately, it's been really convenient to meet people by Zoom and by video, but we still also believe that it's important to meet people in person. So we really appreciate all the candidates coming out tonight and subjecting themselves to our questioning. So tonight we are starting with the select board candidates. I wanted to introduce myself also. My name is Julie Wu. In case you don't know me, I'm president of the Belmont Pan Asian Coalition. Michael Gao over there, he is with the Belmont Chinese American Association. What's your title now? Is it?
Public Relations Chair.
Okay.
Chair of Public Relations.
Chair of Public Relations. And also we have here Dipali Trivedi, and she is a board member of the Belmont Pan Asian Coalition. She'll be handling the timing. We have John Yue here. He's a school committee member and also a member of the Belmont Pan Asian Coalition. He's going to be manning the Zoom. So we're going to have questions from the audience here and also from Zoom participants. So so have your questions ready. So first of all, I would like to thank all of you. You've all spent many hours of service to the community, and here you are stepping up for even more hours. So thank you so much for all that you've done for our community. And with that, I just wanted to say, if you just sort of general ground rules, I feel a little bit self-conscious saying this kind of thing in front of Michael Widmer. but I just wanted to ask people to please be respectful and and to please address the issues and not engage in personal attacks. So we're going to have a general format of sort of a town hall format where you're each going to have 2 minutes to make an opening statement. And then at the end, you'll have 2 minutes for a closing statement. In between, I'll ask some questions. Some of them are from our own organization, and some of them are from our two organizations. And then we will open up the questions to members of the audience. So, and then for your answers to those questions that we ask, you'll have 2 minutes to respond. And Holly will give you a 30-second warning. Okay. Okay, we just because we want to make sure that everybody gets their questions in. If we have more time at the end, then of course we can ask you to expound more. And then after and here, once Mike Crowley shows, then we can do the moderator, the moderator portion of this. So, okay. So I just wanted to briefly introduce our members here. So I think that most everybody knows most of the people here, but I'll start off, we'll do this alphabetically. So Alex Howard is a former Marine and chief scientist at the Air Force Research Laboratory. Jeff Lubian is chair of the Warrant Committee and has been for 3 years. And he's also served on the Temporary Financial Task Force 2, the Temporary OPEB Committee, and the Temporary Position Review Committee. Matt Taylor is a member of the Warrant Committee also, and also a member of Town Meeting. So, all right, so with that, if you don't mind, I'll start off with my first question. So this is sort of an opportunity for us to get a little bit beyond the sort of campaign sound bites. So I just wanted to ask you, like I said, thank you all for all of your hours of service and hard work. And for Matt and Jeff, you've been on the warrant committee, which is particularly time consuming. And also one of the most consequential.
Aren't you going to give them time for an opening statement?
Oh, yes, sorry. Opening statements. Opening statement. I'm just so eager to don't answer the questions.
Well, now we know the first question.
Okay. Okay. So let's start with the opening statements. Let's go alphabetically. Alex.
Well, I feel like I've always started, so I would actually like to give Matt a chance, because it seems like every other forum we've all been in, they always start with
Alphabetically?
alphabetical,
Okay,
so
with
I
Matt.
feel like it's fair to.
Ready for the second half of the alphabet.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, my name is Matt Taylor. Like Julie said, I am on town meeting and the warrant committee now. My family settled in Belmont in 2014. My daughter goes to Burbank and my son goes to Chenery. I want to talk about a couple, I think, core things that I've been talking about from the very beginning of my campaign. One is, I think building bridges, bridging, the difficulty for everyday residents in Belmont to understand and access the data and information and what's going on in Belmont. There's a lot of committees, there's a lot of discussions, there's a lot of data. So even before I was running, I built my own website to try to make our town more explainable. It has things like a visual budget where you can see at a high level where the dollars are spent and even click on the boxes and drill down into the details. And that's part of just like how I think local government can and should work. Trying to generate a two-way dialogue with residents to help them understand how we're doing, how we're serving you, where are we going, and how do we get there. I think I also want to talk about, as a volunteer in Belmont, that, I bridge some of the, I think, tension that I feel just even talking to a lot of residents and within our government, this, we talk about the municipal side and the school side as if they are separate things. And I'm very much a community first data nerd who thinks about, hey, how do we bridge these divides and move forward together? So I am the only candidate that's endorsed by any of the current school committee members, and a majority of them do publicly endorse me. And I think this is one of the most urgent healing things that we have to do, and really opens up some of our best paths for healing the divides within our community and how we talk about the budget and new ways to grow Belmont. And then lastly, I want to talk about, kind of unifying all together, is that, I talk a lot about using data to back goals and ideas, like getting to a 10% commercial tax base. And I talk about that because data shows that's where municipalities can start shifting the tax burden from residences to commercial properties. And there's a lot more on my website, mattforbelmont.com. And I think having a big unifying goal will prioritize our time, makes it an us thing. And I'm so big on the us things. And lastly, I want to talk about safety and access. And I've worked a lot with helping previous campaigns. I helped Jung run for school committee. I advocated for the library campaign. I started a petition to preserve children's room hours. And this is all about bringing the whole community together as residents, not just voters, as one Belmont. Thank you.
Thanks. So,
Next.
sure, if you would like.
Well, thanks for everyone for having us. I appreciate it. I'm Jeff Lubian. I've been a resident for about 17 years. I live in precinct 7 with my wife and daughter, who's a 9th grader, and a 3-year-old yellow lab, Oakley, who is an escape artist, recently a social media star. So we love it in Belmont. We have block parties in our neighborhood. We have an annual barbecue where we have a garage band and invite the neighbors. We also are the Christmas and Halloween house, so we're very much integrated into the town. I started getting involved in government around 2015 with the override and the select board race for Jim Williams. And I really started to realize like how much of local government affects your daily life. And so I ran for town meeting, which at the time, precinct 7, there was a lot of vacancies. I'd like to say we do have competitive races now. And I started participating in town meeting, and then I signed up for the OPEB committee, and through the work using the data and the analysis and taking the lead on that, we were able to bring down the liability by $100 million, put better data systems in place to track it, and make sure we have the right actuary each year doing, or every 2 years doing the valuation. So that was great. I had Liz Allison, Ralph Jones, Mike Woodmer, and Chris Doyle. So I'll talk about, striking gold and getting a great learning curve with that. And then from there, talking with Mike, I decided to go for the warrant committee, which I've been on for 9 years. I've been chair for 3 years. And I think what sets me apart is you understand, you learn the budget, but you also learn leadership and connections. And we're going to face some major challenges with or without an override. Even with an override, we have to manage our fiscal spending and maximize revenue growth. So I am for commercial. The building blocks are there. We have to lead ourselves there. And I'm the person to do that with my experience. Thank you.
Okay, Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex Howard. Moved here to Belmont about 3 years ago and coming from the Southwest. So New England is a great new home and I'm really happy to be here. It's an amazing community. And so I live kind of by town field there. So it's a great place to take the dog, take my son, he's 4.5. Looking forward to him, staying and going to schools here and all, being part of the community. So my background, I'm a Marine Corps officer. Been in the Marine Corps now for about 30 years. In the reserves now, but I've had the opportunity through doing that to lead at every level around the world. Different scenarios you might imagine, some more permissive than others and some not. But whether it's a company or battalion or larger elements, leading people to make decisions of consequence through dignity and respect is kind of where I've honed my skills over the past 30 years. And I've carried that over to my civilian career, first at the Air Force Research Laboratory, and now the commercial sector where I lead a team doing advanced concept engineering. I like to say, I'm also a nerd. I love doing nerd things and so I work with really smart people that challenge me every day, and that's great. Doing research and development and other fun things. So, I bring those skills working with diverse communities to this. And I also offer the opportunity for a fresh look to come in. Obviously, I haven't been in the town meeting or other elements here in Belmont, but I think that is an opportunity for a fresh look, looking at things from a new perspective and bringing in some of these skills that I've learned through my careers and other avenues. And, talking to people, as a VFW a little over a week ago and through, people engaging, there's a lot of interest in the community, whether it's through our tax base, obviously question 1 on the ballot, how to get to 10%, the MBTA, the community path, the zoning, everything from our infrastructure, something that's the second most thing that gets people really, really, really concerned is question 1, taxes. Question 2 is roads. Everyone gets really upset about the roads and sidewalks and everything, of course. But these are issues that I would definitely want to address and tackle, and they're very, very important. And I agree with Matt and Jeff that, we're all one team for the community here. And so I appreciate your vote and look forward to next Tuesday.
So thank you all very much. So now I get to get my first question.
Again.
So again, thank you all for your service to the town and to the country. And I did want to ask you about, my first question was about, I guess, actions. So campaigning is all about, a lot of words. And I just wanted to ask you guys, so for Matt and Jeff, for example, what actions has the warrant committee taken that you were responsible for and that you're proud of? And for Alex, I guess I could ask you, what actions have you taken to improve the town or to benefit the town? So let's see. So last time we started with Matt, so we can start with Jeff.
Okay. 9 years on the warrant committee. I quickly had to come up to speed because Adam won select board race, and he was the chair of the public services subcommittee. He said, Jeff, you want to do it? And I said, sure. And so that was the first time when I was chairing anything, and it was great to learn about public services, DPW facilities, and the great staff we have. And so we really put some of their key issues to light for the town meeting members. As chair, most recently, we've come up with guidelines for a community compact that is up on the website right now, and this is going to give guidance to a working group that will come up with an agreement. Mostly it's a financial agreement to look at ways of, as we call, bending the curve, bringing expenses down, look for new revenue sources, and commit to the voters that there'll be no override if a successful one for 3 years, and that we're going to rein in growth, the rate of growth, because it's just unsustainable even with a successful override. So I think those are key areas I've contributed. I think one of the things that I'm really proud of is, as chair, you present to town meeting the financials and the outlook. And last year in particular, I think I made significant inroads to get the point across about relying too much on one-time funds. It's like paying your credit card with birthday money and still using that credit card. And we were fortunate to have ARPA and some other funds that could plug that gap, but those monies are gone. And so the idea of being more fiscally responsible, especially how we manage what we call free cash, is finally, I think, being understood. And we've come up with a free cash policy that I think is reasonable. And those are the areas where I think I've really contributed and really changed the narrative discussion that's, I think, going to set us up for a good, hopefully successful override, but also put us in a better stability and sustainability financially in the years to come.
Matt, do you want to go next?
Sure. This is my second year on the warrant committee. I'm having a wonderful time. I'm really grateful to Mike Whitmer for appointing me. I think one of the big things that I bring to the warrant committee is a perspective on community and communication. I was the primary author on more than 20 pages of the warrant committee report last year. I primarily focused on the pension section, the enrollment in our schools section, and the staffing in our schools section. And I think there's a couple of things that I brought there. One was a thoroughness. I really went deep and broad and found sources of original data that had not been looked at before, and was really able to reproduce from ground principles and original sources to back the conclusions. For example, the pension section was about, I think it was about 12 pages long and had more than 40 footnotes. And it turned out that this was really important. And you have to follow up and check everything and cite the data, and this allows people to check your work, and people will look. The second thing I did was I added a lot of visualizations, and this is a part about bringing people in, inviting not just all of town meeting, but all residents to access the information and the conversations that we're talking about. It turned out that this was also really important. And I've received a lot of comments, particularly around the enrollment sections where I talked about English language learners and students with disabilities. I updated our language and how do we refer to these groups, because I think how we talk to people and about people is really important, and to always put the people in front of the numbers, even though we're dealing with math. And I think a lot of that perspective of to always being mindful that we're talking about individuals, sometimes very few individuals, when we're talking about the budget and the numbers, has brought a level of empathy to our work that is deeply needed to help our community access and understand the information and to make local government about the people. Did I just nail the timing?
Okay, Alex?
Yeah, so maybe a different slant on the question, because I haven't been on the town committee, but, I've had the opportunity to, like I said, work around the globe with various communities and different people from all different backgrounds, bringing, disaster relief, humanitarian aid overseas, for example, or, things of that nature, training, in different Eastern European countries. But that's not directly applicable here, right? Because Belmont is in Boston, New England, beautiful place. The weather leaves a little bit to be desired, of course, but but what I can offer, besides, cleaning up my neighbor's yards with their leaves, I do use a leaf blower. I love it. Makes it quick. But I believe that through dignity and respect and trust and transparency, I believe that we can work through, as Jeff and Matt discussed, and how do we, make these connections and make everyone effective and moving in the same direction. A lot of people, everyone has a different idea and approach, and everyone has a voice, and they should. And I think that that's important to solving these complex problems and how do we get, traction and be efficient and do this. I think that I've demonstrated experience in doing that, taking these diverse communities, people with very strong opinions, and navigating these complex problems to come to solutions that close in a time relevant manner. I do think that, yeah, we are going forward with the question one, the override, but I think that it's almost it's a promise we're making, a compact that, hey, we're asking for the override this time, but let's try and fix the problem or come to some sort of resolution that we don't have to come back to that well in the future and ask for another override. I know we've had many over the years, but let's find a way of closing on a solution. Now, this might be simplistic and optimistic, but there ought to be a way where we can do this in a reasonable, pragmatic manner where we don't have to keep coming back, because this affects people. Talking to some folks last week, one gentleman said, he bought my home. He said, I bought my home a number of years ago, it was $30,000. Now it's a lot more. So his assessed tax value, I was like, well, that's really impressive. But he's, lived here pretty much his whole life. And so he's really feeling it, right? As we increase taxes at an unprecedented rate, that impacts, his fixed income. So, and this is not just an isolated case, but I think that in positions of leadership like this, we need to make sure that we are holding true to that and providing the resources that we're assuring that we are, and that we're also not going back and asking for more and more and more and outpacing the rate of growth. So if we are growing, let's do it intelligently, but make sure that it's in the right manner.
Thank you. So while we're on the subject of the override, we have a question about that from the BCAA, just about whether you support the override. And I know that the three of you have put it on record that you all support the override. So I guess we can just say a little bit more broadly, like maybe you can explain, the three of you in your different ways, why you believe the override is necessary, what you think it will accomplish, how you would mitigate it, its continued, our dependency on it, and also the consequences of not. I know that's very quick to do. It's a lot to do in 2 minutes, but maybe you could try. Let's see who began last time.
I started last.
Start with Matt.
Sure. Yeah, so I support our community passing the override, and I acknowledge, I think we all have, that it's a very big ask. One of the things I started my campaign with, and this is very on brand for me, is I look for root causes. I look to solve problems. And so when I analyzed our tax data, I spoke at our tax assessors hearing, and the root cause is our fundamental structure of our town. We have always neglected stuff. My family settled here in 2014, and in the 2.5 decades prior to that, we averaged $60,000 a year on sidewalks. That's 2.5 decades. And we have a lot of stories like that, and we are a changing town. So what is the root cause? It's a low commercial tax base, and that we tend to not unify our work and prioritize our time. We spent the past 2 decades focused on buildings and replacing those buildings. We did not similarly focus on growth that would have sustained the services and the people who would staff those buildings. And this tax base issue underpins almost all of our problems. Our employees can't find places to rent, much less dream of buying. This makes hiring hard. Seniors can't find missing middle housing. We don't have vibrant commercial centers. And so I've been talking to people broadly from day one. I put together the data, I sent it to the select board, and I said, we should tell everybody. And that's what I've been doing. This is a big ask. It doesn't make the needs, don't make the money exist, which is some of the fundamental problem. And so this override is very much a choice, and each of those choices will hurt some of the members of our community. And I feel that really deeply. I think there's additional ways we can structure overrides, and I advocated for this to be included in the compact, such that we're not structuring it such that our overrides are big all or nothing asks. And there's examples from other communities how they structure it this way. In addition to the new growth, which will help fund the things that we would like. But this is a choice. The community that we want, it's not the taxes that anybody wants.
Thank you. So Alex, you just spoke about the override. Do you want to speak again?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I'll say, yeah, I reluctantly agree. I think we're in a position where, Matt mentioned it's been a couple of decades. We didn't get here overnight. It didn't just, oh, shoot, in this last year, we realized we need an override. That train was coming. And it's, priorities have shifted and the town has grown in different unforeseen ways perhaps, but it's important. And I think that at this point, the cost of not approving override would be more expensive than the cost of approving it. We can't just turn off all of these services, let these people go potentially, and then bring them back later. These are people's lives. These are resources. These are services that are very important to the community. I think it's very important, that we approach and make sound decisions with how we budget and how we spend these precious resources. Instead of doing a lowest bidder, maybe we go to a best value, type approach. And, maybe a little, might be a little more expensive in the short term, but save money in the long term. It's definitely, these are key issues. I think the root cause of some of the fiscal with the businesses that we're looking at is zoning. We really need to address how the zoning is done. Maybe it seems like we've always patched it. There's been, let's add to the zoning. Let's add to the zoning bylaws. Let's keep adding piece parts, but let's go ahead and maybe look at how we can make the zoning efficient and streamline the process by which we get businesses into Belmont. And, we're confined. We got 4.7 square miles. I think Matt will have to double check my data here, but I think Belmont is the 10th most expensive place to live in Massachusetts, but our average income is number 27. So there's a little bit of disparity there. Please, definitely fact check that. I might be off by a few numbers there, but it's in that same order where those numbers don't match up. And it is expensive, and average home prices continue to rise. And so I do think that, we can look up different opportunities like community path and leveraging high density areas, multi-use areas to increase and reach those MBTA numbers, which also increase our, business income resources that way. And these are just some of the opportunities I think we have ahead of us that we can take advantage of.
Jeff?
Yeah, so I'm in favor of the override. I look at it, there's two components to it in my mind. First, you need about $7.4 million for the next 3 years just to keep the lights on. We've been using significant amounts of one-time funds, $9 million last year to plug the gap. So we need to do that just to keep the status quo. Now, the additional investment, I think, is worthwhile in the additional sidewalk, $250,000, doubling the budget, and also investment in bringing more in-district special education services for our students, which is much better for our students. They can stay in the school, they can do extracurricular, after-school programs, they're not on a bus for an hour plus each way. And it also, in-district, is a much more manageable cost. The investment will take some time, but it will be the right move because that is one of the biggest drivers of our budget, and it is mandated, and we're obligated, and we want to do this. I mean, these are services we need and should provide. And the more we can do in-house, the better. And I think the other thing too is the issue is twofold. It is not just revenue. Whatever we can do to increase revenues is great, and we need to increase the commercial base, but it's going to take time. We do have an expense issue. Under Prop 2.5, with some new growth, you're averaging about 3% growth per year in your revenues. If we have multiple years in a row of high single digit to double digit growth in some of our key budget line items, it's not sustainable, even with another override. So it has to be, we have to manage it, and being fiscally responsible is not saying you're against investments in schools or any of the other town services. It's you can do both. They're not mutually exclusive. And that's why I'm very adamant about getting our finances in order, doing what we can through zoning and through commercial development. I'm the only person running right now that has actually put out concrete action items I would take as select board. And one of those also is to create a working group for the senior tax relief to actually put pen to paper and get some sort of additional exemptions that are good. It's going to take time. but it's the right thing to do, as well as do everything we can to promote Belmont and drive more commercial business in town and growing the town wisely and keeping that small town feel, but meeting the needs of ours to maintain services and improve services, well into the future.
So, thank you. And I guess, while we're on this subject of commercial development, I'm gonna ask you folks to tell me what your plans are for increasing our commercial development, particularly in our centers like Waverly, Cushing Square, Belmont Center, where we have tremendous opportunity, but we also are seeing a lot of continuously turning over businesses. So we'll start with Jeff this time.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a short-term problem and a longer-term problem. The short-term problem is, yes, unfortunately, especially Belmont Center, we have 20% vacancy rate. There's no anchor stores that are really bringing the traffic, and those businesses that are there are suffering. I've met with the business association and many of the businesses. I think short-term, the select board should reach out and talk to the landlords and look for maybe some sort of relief or a modified rent where there's a flat rate and then there's one that's tied to business volume. I also think we need to promote. The select board has commissioned a economic analysis through the town planner, Chris Ryan, and that's going to look at Belmont holistically and give key recommendations from experts of how to get us moving in the right direction with commercial development, from zoning to the other thing I really like is coming up with a marketing plan. Pitch Belmont. Why Belmont? What makes Belmont attractive? And as a select board member, I think it's our responsibility to go out and be the pitch person for that and to work with the material that has been created and sell Belmont. And also another key thing is we have to maintain our commercial real estate footprint. The MBTA communities, I'm all for it. It is increasing the housing stock, which is desperately needed in the state. But let's do it responsible so that we don't encroach on pure commercial areas like South Pleasant or the Shaw's or the supermarket. And from there, we can start really moving the needle. It's going to take time to get us to 10%, but if we need to push it forward, and it starts with leadership and taking all the good work that's already been done and getting buy-in, and in particular, mostly buy-in from the residents. Because one thing we can present is that if you have some sort of commercial development come in that could take $1 million off the tax base for the residents, then people start to think differently about the big, 4-story building going up on Pleasant Street or wherever it may be. And so I think those are the things that I would bring to the table, is bringing the leadership and providing the direction to leverage all the work that's been done by various committees such as Economic Development, Vision 21, and this commission work that the select board has just signed up for.
Let's see. What's go next?
All right.
Okay, Matt.
I love this topic because I started my campaign here. I have nerded out deep in property data, properties. I have the entire property database. I sat down with our town planner. He's amazing. I'm a big fan. It's an hour-long conversation. I have a ton of detail on my website, mattforbelmont.com/vision. I lay out 14 different principles and ideals on how we can move forward as a community to do this. I love that the work that I did to dig through the data in Massachusetts has anchored the conversation around getting to a 10% commercial tax base, because that makes us an us goal. And having people on the select board that find win-win-wins using data to find us goals that unify the community is exactly what we need to round out the team that's there. And I bring that every day. So what does this mean? Sure, it's broad-based, building up mid-rise, vibrant communities. I've gone through a whole lot of urban planning data. I've sat down with experts. I'm not being prescriptive about it though. And we have a lot of opportunity. I look at land use and how do we make a plot of land more valuable, right? We're a land-constrained town. So how do we protect our open space and our historic buildings? It means building up a bit, making a plot of land 13 times more valuable. Ask me later how I came up with that number, because it's based on the data. And we have real opportunity here, but this opportunity assessment is just getting started. Our last, look at the last 10 years. Our last master plan said very little about the commercial development. Our warrant committee reports said very little about commercial development, except in the assessors section, they sometimes would mention it. So we have not been screaming from the rooftops that this is the fundamental thing that we have not fixed, and it is everything to our community. It is how we make it an us goal, and I love it. This idea has to win, regardless of any outcome next Tuesday. This idea has to win because it is what sets our community up for the best path to success. And when you take someone like me who has the passion, who has the data, who backed it up, who finds a unifying goal, that's exactly what we need coming out of this pandemic. This is an us issue. This is not just for voters who will decide this on Tuesday. It's all residents, current and future, all employees, current and future. So when I said in the Belmont Journal debate that I wanted to speak more broadly about members of our community, that is what I feel. That is what this issue is. It's about people, it's about our future, and it's about what we share together. And I feel that every day. And I will think about that as my oath to you to better serve Belmont every day.
Okay, Alex?
These are tough acts to follow. I would tell you, you got an economist, you got, and the answer is, yeah, I mean, exactly, right? We do need to do this. We don't have anchor industry businesses here in Belmont. And you look at, just outside here, there's a bunch of empty storefronts and big turnover, I think you mentioned. How do we actually get people to come? That's right, and keep the culture of the town of Belmont that we all love. And that's, talking to the community part, whoever, two of us aren't going to be elected next Tuesday, but we're not moving, we're staying here. And so we still have a vested interest in what Belmont is and should be, can be. And so I think with that in mind, yeah, we look at the data and we see how do we do this? And I think we should explore public-private partnerships where applicable. For example, the rink, right? We're shouldering the burden of that entirely on the taxes. Is there an opportunity to look at a public-private partnership there to maybe offload some of that? Maybe the pool the same way, right? Other things, I don't know, that's not going to be a huge shift and alleviate the entire need for override, but it helps. Okay. And right now we're looking at what helps and what doesn't. And so that could be something, how do we also maybe incentivize businesses to come here with taxes, lower the property taxes, reading some documents, like the Belmont Country Club, for example, has a tax incentive currently. And I think that we can offer that to bring people here, bring industry, businesses that are longstanding and can put roots in and help develop the town in the different centers, Belmont Center, Waverly, Cushing, the areas we have is mentioned. And how do we preserve our open space at the same time, right? And, we look at I think the 13, that was the Cushing, right, with the apartment complex, which is luxury apartments right there. It definitely fits in. It's not an eyesore that many people may have thought it was. Different things that we have to evolve the culture and climate here in Belmont. I think those should be explored.
I could ask you questions myself, but I wanted to share the questions. If there are any questions on the floor right now?
Sure. I actually am curious about how our school budget spending compares to our peers, period towns. We are at 60 to 80% of revenue or recurring revenue going to the schools, which doesn't leave that much. And how does that compare?
Who wants to tackle that?
Are you asking like a price per student or are we looking at absolute?
Price per student isn't that interesting.
We're trying to normalize it because we have different population of students than our neighbors.
Has anyone done any analysis that looks at how much of our budget we spend on schools compared to our peer towns?
So in case people can't hear on Zoom, so this question is, how does Belmont compare to peer towns in terms of the proportion of our budget that goes to the schools?
Maybe budget for revenue or something like that, like whatever money.
Does anyone want to go, or I will,
Go
I will?
ahead. Yeah, I know you have, it's on the website.
Yeah.
Like, go to 02478.org.
So it varies. I've looked at peer towns and I've looked at it this way. I think and the other part is we back out shared services. I don't have the data in front of me right now, so I want to be very cautious about throwing out specific numbers. But if you look at there's a Department of Revenue report on the Massachusetts website that breaks out percent of revenues by various towns, and I have looked at this, and it does range widely. One of the things I've noticed, especially if you factor in peer towns, is there's a large variety of how many children you have in town. Belmont is about 25% 17 and younger, according to the US Census.
20, actually 17% supposed, 17 or 18% in the school system.
I'm just talking about the population in Belmont is about, according to the census, is about 25% 17 and younger. Of the children who are 5 through 18, about 89% of them attend Belmont public schools. That's dipped a little bit since and during the pandemic, and that's typical. Like Lexington dipped, I think, 2 percentage points. We dipped about 1 percentage point.
You're going to the weeds. I love it.
Sure.
I love you for it, but
Yeah.
maybe.
So
we spend
one of
60% of our budget.
one of the things that
Schools, how about our peers?
one of the things that drives our education budget is, I believe, the model we use to handle special education and students with disabilities.
I understand that. I'm beginning.
But I don't have the exact number of percent of revenue. There were some that were higher and there were some that were lower. And a lot of that seemed to hinge on how many children you had in your town.
Okay. Jeff, any insight?
Yeah, I would say we tend to be in the upper group in terms of the percentage that goes to the schools for compared to the municipal. And again, I think to point Matt made, it depends how you slice and dice. You can go from 60 to 70% rather quickly. We have shared services. If you were actually to dice out shared services, that increases at 60 to about 70 and change last time I had looked at it.
Actually, when you include debt exclusion in one way.
Wow, and again, if you want to do that, obviously we have a $300 million high school, so that's going to dwarf everything, right? But I think really two of the main drivers historically has been up until the pandemic, we had unprecedented growth in the number of students, about 100 per year for 10 years. We've lost students since the pandemic. They've gone to private schools or to different towns. And so we lost about 350 students. I think we're still about 200 and change down from the peak. But that was one of the driving factors, and that was the decisions behind the new school, the new high school plus the additional school. So we opened a new school, and that adds a lot of cost. And then the other significant driver, and Matt is correct on this, this is why we want to make these investments. There was a review done by an independent firm on our special education, and it was a pretty scathing report that we, out of our comparable towns, we have the highest percentage of students that go out of district. And one of the root causes there is we do not have enough early intervention.
Right, no, I understand that we're addressing that. I don't understand very much about it, but I do understand the basics. Mr. Howard, anything from you?
So, yeah, it is hard to pin down, right? It's because, hey, our total revenue is X and we always have Y. Well, it's not always the same. And I think compared, so it varies. But well, your question, I guess, what I'm understanding is how does it compare with like Lexington, Newton, all those? I think they vary the same. So there's a huge overlap in that Venn diagram. And I think that what it really tells me is that it's the priority. Where does Belmont put the priority? And I think that the school system is a source of pride for Belmont. And I think that it was consistently ranked among the top in the state. And, which is great. It's one of the things that brings people here and helps in a vibrant community and bringing potential businesses here. Hopefully Matt's looking it up. But,
That is what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
Follow-up question?
So I wish I had a better.
Why don't we give somebody else a chance to ask a question?
No, it's a good question though, because it's comparative, right? And I think that there's some anomalies, but I think that we are probably within the same ballpark of similarly performing districts and towns.
There's a list. I'd be happy to sit down with you afterwards to pull up the actual data.
Actually, I have to run over to the other meeting 8:15 decision, but.
Oh, okay. Actually, are there any questions online?
There is nobody with their hands up right now.
Okay, so,
I have a question. And actually, why don't you go first? I can.
Okay.
My, my,
right, let's go ahead and then we'll.
My wife and I have lived in Belmont since 1973. In the intervening 50 years, we've seen selectmen come and go. And then it became the select board as it got a big ginger change, which was very helpful. I'm not so much interested in my question in terms of what you're going to do. I'm interested in why. Why are each of you, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to be on this select board? It's a pain in the butt. It's wonderful. I'm always appreciative of the people who do it. Some do it remarkably well, some are average, and some I sort of thought been better if you stayed home. So I'm curious, why do each of you want to do this?
Oh, let me just repeat the question for the Zoom audience. The question is, why do this pain in the butt job?
Not quite that poetic.
I'm happy to go first if that's fine.
Okay.
So I understand. Yes, it's a heavy lift. I will say I really look at my experience on the warrant committee, especially as chair. People have asked how are you going to balance the two? It's a lot of work as chair of the warrant committee. There's a lot of sub meetings. We had one about planning for town meeting last week. Some of us met today to talk about some budget issues that we want to discuss on Wednesday's warrant committee. So I have invested a lot of time, and really I don't feel like I'm done. There's more I can do, and I can take all the knowledge I've learned, the relationships, and help lead Belmont through this time, this transition of, getting past the override, allowing time to pause, but we need to change the way we look at things in terms of expenses and revenues. And I think I am the one best position for that. I'm willing to do the work. I really truly believe that good governance is by leading and setting an example, and having those conversations and doing the extra work to get us to a point where we're ready and poised for the next 10 to 20, 30 years. And part of that is going to be getting a lot of buy-in from different residents and different folks. And I really am passionate about the town, and I'm really concerned about about the future. Even with a successful override, there's going to be a lot of things we need to do. And I'm excited. There's new initiatives. There's new individuals on the Economic Development Committee, on the Vision 21, and they're really there's this momentum building about putting us on the right path forward with a master plan, with more commercial development, reining in expenses where we can, and maintaining the level of service that we've all come to love while keeping Belmont that small town charm. And I think I could add to that.
Alex, do you want to go next?
The short answer is because I care. I'm not saying that I care more than these two gentlemen. We all care. That's why we're running. We want to make a difference. I've spent my entire adult life in the service of the country. And so moving here, it's okay, how do I serve my community? And, I was always taught to give back more than you take. And so that's where I'm coming from when I decided to run for the select board, was where do I think I can make the most impact? Where do I think I can be the most helpful and be of most service? And so that's why I chose, I've reviewed and talked to folks and, yep, hey, Alex, select board ought to be what you're looking for. Also, yes, I have my priority. We all have our priorities, but it's really the involved members of the town, the town meeting, the committees that really take the forefront, right? Where do we want to be? How do we get there? And how do we steer and take these disparate ideas, desires, and wants for the way we want our town to shape up and move the big organization to make these actionable changes? And that's why I want to do it, because I care. I'm raising my son here. I have two older children that are off, but I do have a young one that's going to be here, and I think that it's important to give back to where I'm living, for potentially forever at this point. So.
I love your question. I did a lot of self-work during the pandemic about what does it all mean? And I felt really disconnected from residents, from each other. And, as a shy, my background is being a shy data nerd. And I said, what does it all mean? And leveling up my career wasn't going to be it. And what is a scale where I can really make a positive difference? And I looked around at a national level and a global level, and the pandemic reinforced all this. And, there's so many troubling examples of how we're at odds with each other, and we make it a divisive issue rather than an us issue. And I realized that because I had a broad knowledge of how Belmont works, and I talked to a lot of people before I was on any committee or anything, it's like, this is a healing step that we so desperately need. And I feel it. And so I ran my campaign starting with issues rather than trying to please everybody and stand for nothing. I led with issues from day one. And I led with my core belief that we have so much in common because we are neighbors. And so despite any other differences, most of the stuff we have is a shared goal or a shared frustration. And I feel such a drive to work on those things together and to find us goals and us solutions. And I'm creative, I'm just running as me. I've lost votes by having to because I'm not trying to be a politician. I'm trying to do good in the world. And at a scale where I can actually help people that I know and live near and make a positive difference. And that's an us thing. I was an executive at a successful startup. You have to empower others. The select board is not some all-powerful committee. There's no glory. It's work. But what is glorious is the people you meet along the way, the people you help, the people you serve. And I talk about residents, not voters, because everybody counts. I knock on doors and I meet people who can't vote. And it tears at my heart that they are unrepresented in our own community. And I know people who are working on having, non-citizens being able to vote in our local elections. And it's because it's broadening access and representation, because community is about us. And Belmont can be a shining example of that. And I see it, and I want everyone to see it too.
John, I had a question.
We do have a couple questions on the web, and we don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to ask you to be a little briefer in your answers going
Good luck.
forward. My question is, how do you make sure that our, about 30% of Asian communities' voice are heard? Because often they do not turn out to these events, and it is harder to reach them. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I guess we'll start with that.
That's a hard question, because people, like, when there's a driving force, for example, in this case, question one, the override, we know there's going to be a higher than normal turnout in the election next Tuesday. So it's really understanding what are the issues in the community that they're interested in, that these different groups want to make a difference in or want to change. And unless it's something that really drives that needle, it's going to be hard to pull that out, right? So we can go door to door, maybe not the most efficient, but it's building the trust, being transparent in how we do things. And also, letting people know that it's not this huge, overwhelming bureaucracy that's going to be painful and take a decade to make a change, but how do we help streamline the process? I mean, it can. I see the face. It can. But how do we streamline and actually help people weigh in on issues that they're interested in? And how do we, help them make a difference in that way on those things?
Yeah.
You could go.
All right. So the Asian community, and even just more generally, the immigrant community in Belmont is growing. We are a town of immigrants, and representation and access is everything. But I've knocked on almost 1,400 doors this campaign season since the beginning of January. And I've talked to non-voters as well. But they still have yard signs out. They're still advocating for themselves. They're finding ways to contribute and to show up, because a lot of our more recent residents have moved to Belmont can't vote, and they have no say in their local property taxes and less of a voice. And then culturally, I've seen that, other cultures are not, it can be shameful to promote yourself or advocate for yourself. And that, can be a barrier to participating in open meeting law or putting forth amendments or running for office. And I think, more than anything, I look at like our English language learners in our schools. And I talked about this when the kindergarten aides were considering being cut. And I mentioned our great success with English language learners, where about 30% of our kindergarten class is English language learners. And as like these kindergarten aides are paid less than 40 grand a year. It's a pittance, but we're turning around. These English language learners are thriving on, a couple years later. We're doing amazing work. We can't be cutting this on the backs of 5-year-olds who are trying to learn English. And so I think so much of this, and I feel this is such a, people say, Matt, how are you going to do all this work? The select board is a lot of detail work. And you're talking about all this vision and management and leadership stuff and community outreach. How are you going to do that? And my answer is, I will work twice as much. That is my promise to you. I will work twice as much because we cannot drop the ball on being present in our community and present at events for our neighbors and our residents where they have informal and formal access to you. You are their neighbor and they are mine.
Yep.
I think, no, great question. I think, one area in particular is helping to promote and listen and have regular meetings with these groups and be very supportive of the different events. I think it's been fantastic. You've had 3 or 4 events. You have a run. There's a run coming up. That's great to promote, and I would continue to do what I can as a select board member to promote those events, encourage more. I went also to the Belmont Muslim Association's Ramadan celebration. I ran into people I hadn't seen in years, and it was great to see, and it was a great event. And they're getting their head of steam to be a more active and known group in town. So I think all of these need to have their airtime. So let's have them come in and explain to the select board what the group is doing, what events they're having. I would definitely would attend meetings just to hear how things are going. What are the pain points? What are the challenges? And encourage many to join where they can government. Working with Mike, we're trying to add more people to the warrant committee who have different backgrounds, different ages, and it's important to try to get more representation in our different government committees. And I think it adds for a fuller discussion and a much more broad outreach so that everyone is heard and we understand, what challenges people new to Belmont are facing, and, how can we help them along and get the most out of the community like we want everyone to. So I think those are key areas, and it's just getting out there and being available for different groups and promoting their agendas as well as their, activities.
All right. We're at 8 o'clock. So is there another question?
We have a couple questions. Do you want to ask you a question?
I'm sorry?
Paul Robert has raised his hand, so I don't know if you want to ask his question.
Oh, I don't know. We want to have time for the moderators too. So I don't know whether we should,
Okay, we have one more question that somebody want to ask, so why don't we ask that and then we'll switch over.
okay.
Keep it brief.
Yeah, we'll keep
Yeah,
it brief.
if you could keep
1
it
minute,
brief,
1
that would be
minute.
great.
Yeah, lightning round.
Yeah, that's right. There we go.
So the question is on what do you think of the financial impact of demographic changes for the town will be for the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years? And, how it might affect new family enrollment, town resources, or maybe even related zoning or, multi-use families. Take your thoughts on these.
That's the question.
That's-
I could go. I'll give a quick answer. I think we're always going to have to learn how to adapt to the changing footprint of Belmont. And that obviously has changed in the last 20 years. It will continue to change. I think one of the key areas is to have policies in place, a master plan that always is driving us forward. We're gonna have deviations, we're gonna have to make it, exceptions or make changes, but we have a concrete plan, both from, planning, zoning, commercial, financial, that we can always just point to as these are our guiding principles and these are the goals that we want for the town. And I think that will help us when we have potential shocks to the system. Let's say all of a sudden enrollment increases significantly again in the next 10 years. We do have capacity, but that's going to obviously put more pressure on our budgets. But if we have these things in place and we're moving together, I think we can absorb these changes and continue, like I said, to provide the services that we've all come to love, improve where we can, and keep the town, the charming small town feel that we've all come to love. And I think that is about planning and being disciplined and to be able to handle those changes as they come down and whatever they may be.
Briefly.
So in terms of the economic situation, we're in a lot of ways a bimodal town. We have longtime residents who could move here when you had a good job, but potentially even a blue collar job. And now the people who move in are often highly educated, dual income earners. And there's not a whole lot in the middle. Like, you know, we could do like a treasure hunt trying to find someone who's between the ages of say 26 and 34 in Belmont. And you know, so I think a lot. I will nerd out with anyone and everyone on this afterwards in terms of I looked at census data. I did a whole bunch of stuff that I presented in terms of the context of our enrollment and our schools and our education system. And I have a lot of forward-looking information. My background is in forward-looking predictions and insights powered by data and precedents. And this is just desperately needed given the inflection point we are in our town and in the economy and the environment. And given that we haven't had a master plan for years and we haven't had these zoning changes and we haven't had a unifying goal. And all of this comes together where we need this now. And I have the skills that round out the select board team. And that's why we need to make this difference.
Alex?
That was a great answer. Bimodal, yeah, it is bimodal. That's exactly it. I was just thinking, yeah, someone between that age group, shoot, none of my neighbors, right? And so I think if done intelligently and appropriately, I think that as we incentivize the right businesses to come into Belmont, we are going to see an increasingly younger population with families, young families moving out of, say, Boston over here, because Belmont is a gem. The proximity is second to none. Got freeway access, highway, whichever term. Yeah, it's the city right there. You know, it's awesome. It's hard to beat. And so I think that is going to continue to draw the younger dual income families out of Boston or other areas into Belmont. With, again, the schools, that's a huge draw. And so I think that we're going to start seeing that younger population move up or increase here in Belmont. And accordingly, we're going to have to plan appropriately with a master plan to accommodate the increase in the students and other services that will be needed for that.
Actually, Paul Robert had a question, which I think is a yes, no plus 2 sentences. Just let him ask that.
Well, I don't know. Well.
That,
We can do yes, no, if you want. So.
Yes, no, how about that?
Paul.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Paul Roberts, town meeting member from Precinct 8. Our neighbors in Watertown in 1980 instituted a charter review committee for that town that recommended changes to their town's charter. It has met every 10 years since then and consistently implemented changes and improvements in the structure of Watertown's government. Would each select board member please state yes or no whether you would support the creation of a charter review committee in Belmont and that would similarly meet every few number of years and recommend changes to our town's charter?
Sounds like a good idea and part of a master plan, so yes.
Belmont, we don't have a charter. Not all towns have charters. I think it's something we need to look into. It's a very lengthy, complicated process. You know, master plan gets us in that direction. I'd want to dive into it more, but I think it's a good idea. And it's something that we should strive for because, again, what I mentioned earlier, if we have plans in place and mechanisms to grade ourselves, hold ourselves accountable, and revisit as things change, you have to revisit what some of the key goals are of the town. And there's things that we can't even predict, that happen in 5 years. So, yes, the spirit of it, definitely something I'd look into, along with the other, discussion topics I've brought up.
Okay. Good.
Hey, look, change is needed, change. So I support constantly assessing how are we doing and how effectively are we serving our residents and then updating our processes. We need a government that is more dynamic the next 10 years than we have been the last 10 years. So I'm fully supportive of constantly assessing, are we being maximally effective for our residents every day? And how do I and everyone around me get better? And we will do it.
Sounds good. Now let's move to closing statements and then we'll move on to the moderators. So, okay, this time, Alex, you can start since you're.
Great, I'll keep it, hopefully, I'll keep it brief
Keep
and
it brief.
set a
I
trend.
think you've probably said some of your stuff.
Yeah.
Again, Alex Howard, really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to discuss some of my thoughts on different questions. Some really good questions tonight. I think that beyond the buzzwords, trust, transparency, dignity, respect, that's just my personal ethos. That's how I operate in my day-to-day life. That's how I prefer to treat everybody the same way. And I believe that everybody has a voice, and I want to be the representative of that voice on the select board. Not saying that the others aren't, but also how do I contribute to that and help the town become the best it can be. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Matt Taylor. I'm running for select board. My website is mattforbelmont.com. I believe that the skills I bring, the attitude I bring, the passion I bring, and the groundwork that I've done before I was a formal volunteer in Belmont is exactly the missing piece we need. I bridge some of our most precious tensions that provide healing and unify our community going forward. I bring data-backed goals that have led the conversation for this campaign. So when you ask me about my leadership credentials, I say I led with the issues that we're all talking about now. Before I was running, senior tax relief, I brought it up in November when we weren't talking about it at all because it's a core value of mine. And these are the kinds of things that I'm going to follow through, I'm going to empower others, and I'm going to keep the conversation going with all of you 2 ways every day because we can be the best Belmont. I ask for your vote.
Great. No, thanks for having us. I think these forums are great. I wish there was more of them, and I could encourage in future elections that more groups sponsor these. I'm the only candidate with experience. Experience matters, especially for this position. It's complex. There's a lot of moving parts. It's also about having those relationships and leadership. I bring 10 years of municipal experience as long as with a master's degree in economics. And I've built these relationships with different town committees, to residents, and I have shown my leadership skills and ability to be well-balanced, promote good conversations, compromise and collaboration, which is desperately needed because you're one of 2 other select board members that have to come to a compromise and agree to get things done. And that's why I'm being supported, endorsed by all 3 current select board members, as well as the majority of the current warrant committee members that I've been the chair of for the last 3 years. A lot of these ideas have been looked at and continue to be looked at. It's about implementation and having the wherewithal and the influence and the tenacity to see these things through. It's not going to be easy. We're going to have to get consensus and to get things done. So I ask for your vote on April 2nd, Jeff Lubian for select board, and you can learn more about me at lubianforbelmont.com. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. To the moderator candidates. So welcome to Michael Whitmer and Mike Crowley. Thank you so much for all of your years of service to Belmont. Belmont is run by volunteers and you are two prime examples. Mike Whitmer has been town moderator for 16 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
16 years,
Yeah.
and previously was a member of the warrant committee, serving 3 years as the chair. Mike Crowley served on school committee for 4 years, 8 years on town meeting, and 6 years on the warrant committee, and was also on the long-term capital planning committee. So I just want to also just sort of describe, because I think a lot of people may not know who the moderator is, some people who are watching. So the town moderator runs town meetings, sets the scope of the warrant, and makes presentations, appoints the majority of the warrant committee, as well as 5 members of the capital budget committee, a majority of the bylaw review committee, and 6 members of the permanent building advisory committee. Moderator also appoints members to special purpose committees, including all building committees. So it's a very important position, and thank you for serving, and thank you for running. We wanted the same format, so if you could start out with 2 minutes of opening statement. We'll go alphabetically and then we'll do go the other way. So Mike Crowley.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank the Belmont Pan-Asian Coalition, as well as the Belmont Chinese American Association for hosting this event. I also want to thank you, Mike, because actually, I think you gave me my intro to town government with an appointment to the warrant committee several years ago.
I did.
And you know, I have to say that deeply sparked my interest in town government, and I do thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
I think it's important for our Asian American community, which represents a considerable portion of our population, to be involved in Belmont's town government. So I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but I think about 20% of Belmont is Asian by heritage. It could be a little bit higher. This also includes my wife and son. And, you know, of course, we have other ethnic groups in town. And I think if you look at the faces of our town leaders, in fact, and frankly, you know, this includes me as well, the people serving on our committees and our town meeting members, you also know that we have work to do to increase the diversity of our residents who are involved in Belmont's town governance. We have an amazing and growing diversity in Belmont, and one of my foremost goals running for town moderator is to do the education and outreach that I think is needed to involve more people in town meeting and ultimately town government. I'm a big believer that Belmont is better when we're all involved. And speaking of involvement, one of my concerns is the long-term health of town meeting. When you look at this year's April ballot, from my perspective, we don't have enough people running for town meeting. In 4 precincts, if you got your 25 signatures to get on the ballot, you're basically already elected. The election is decided. In the other 4 precincts, you know, they're barely competitive. My precinct, we have 1 person more than there are seats on town meeting running. And, you know, this calls into question, in my mind, ultimately, how representative town meeting is if voters don't have a real choice about who represents them. So if we're going to have this local institution of ours be more democratic, we have to have more people run. or we ultimately just create more frustration. And if you consider the amount of frustration that people in the community are experiencing over the override, I think it's kind of a prime example. And that's not saying the override isn't needed. It definitely is needed. So we need to find more people to run for town meeting member next year. I've knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors in my campaign for town moderator. And while people's concerns are different, I do hear frustration. I also run into quite a few people who don't understand what the role of the moderator is and don't really know how the moderator can address some of our fundamental challenges. I'm looking to improve our town meeting process. I'm looking to improve the moderators committee appointment process. I'm looking to involve.
I think you're running out of time.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, maybe, do the time and then sit over here. So, okay, thank you. Thank you.
Right, so I'd appreciate your vote.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Mike.
Great, thank you. I'm Michael Widmer, and I'm delighted to be here tonight. Thank you for the invitation. It's a real privilege. I'll give you a brief overview of me, my family, and my career. We moved here. My wife, Jean, was here with me. We moved here when our first child, Michelle, was an infant. We had 3 children. They all went through the Belmont Public Schools. They all had good experiences. And I might say I'm proud of where they are today. 2 of those 3 children are in full-time jobs combating racism. And the third job is dealing with troubled children in secondary school. So they're all deeply committed, as I have been in my career, to social justice and public service. Shortly after we arrived here in Belmont and moved here, my wife ran for the school committee. She won. She served for 9 years, 2 years as chair. And under her leadership, the face of public education in Belmont changed. She led the effort to recruit a new superintendent, Peter Holland. He came and he served many years, and he dramatically improved public schools in Belmont. At the same time, during that period, when Jean was chair, we went through 2 debt exclusions, the town of Belmont. Both were approved for the expansion and renovation of Winbrook and Burbank schools. So turning to me personally, I've devoted my life to public service in one capacity or another. I had undergraduate and graduate degrees, Princeton and Harvard, and government. Then I worked and became an expert on state and municipal finances when I ran the Mass Taxpayers Foundation for 25 years. And then in 1993, I was appointed by my predecessor, Henry Hall, to the Warrant Committee. The Warrant Committee is, we all owe a debt of gratitude in this town to the Warrant Committee. They work so hard and so diligently at the job they do. And I've served for 15 years on the Warrant Committee, and then in 2018, I was elected moderator. And let me comment briefly on that, and then I'll stop.
Well, then we'll have to give.
Well, all right.
We need to, you to go over a few.
All right, but that's fine.
Once you just wrap up real quick.
Okay, fine. I've taken many initiatives to revitalize town meeting. There's more participation, more debate, more diversity, and the debate is fair and respectful. One statistic's critical, in particular what Mike Crowley said. In the last 5 years, we've seen a huge turnover in town meeting. There's a major interest in the town in running. 131 or 45% of the 288 town meeting members are new in the last 5 years. So that's exciting, and I hope we can build on that. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Okay, so if you could give a 30-minute warning.
I'll set the timer for 1 minute, 30 seconds. When you hear that, and you know you have 30 seconds left.
All right, that would be helpful.
Okay, that's good.
Otherwise you don't know.
Yeah, we don't want to spring it on you. Okay, so, so thank you very much. So as we mentioned, and as you know, there are kind of two different aspects to the job. One is actually moderating town meeting. And so it's a large body and tensions are running particularly high these days amongst Belmont residents and town meeting members. And I was wondering how you will approach, how you have approached or how you will approach keeping town meeting going in a civil manner, in a civil and constructive manner. And what are your thoughts about that? And what are your philosophies?
So I start.
So Michael.
Yeah, I have been steadfast in my 16 years as moderator in saying that debate needs to be fair and respectful and civil. And it largely has been. And this is our democratic legislative body. And it's critical that we can debate issues passionately. We can disagree with positions. But I have said steadfastly, and I have enforced no ad hominem or personal attacks on individuals or committees. And it's interesting, as I've run for re-election, scores of town meeting members have reached out to me and said, Mike, what I appreciate most is how fair you are and how you keep the debate civil and respectful. I've thought about this particular question. If I'm reelected, I've announced that this is my last year. So one way or another, there will be a transition to a new moderator. That moderator is going to be challenged on just this point. We live in a fractious, angry world, and nobody is holding back their opinions. And so it is going to be critical that town meeting give the support to the next moderator. It's going to be critical for him or her to establish the rules, but for town meeting to follow those. Because if we go down the path of ad hominem attacks on a committee, an individual, then we will descend into chaos. Democracy is too precious to do that.
Thank you.
So I am also a believer in civil debate and discussion. I am concerned about placing limits on what people say outside of the things that we obviously wouldn't tolerate, like hate speech or threatening speech or homophobic speech, racist speech. These are things that I, as moderator, wouldn't tolerate in the least. And frankly, if there were a town meeting member who were engaged in that kind of behavior, it would be a quick route to ejection from town meeting. On the other hand, I don't think I've encountered so many different opinions about how the town is operating, just going door to door. And, you know, it's clear that town meeting members also share a variety of different opinions, and it's important to allow them to express their opinions, of course, in a civil manner. Sometimes those opinions may include criticism of something that the town is doing, something that a town body is doing, something that the town moderator is doing. From my perspective, this is constitutionally protected speech. We have to allow it. If it descends into if it descends into hate speech or racist, homophobic, or other kinds of really profoundly disturbing speech, that would not be tolerated.
I need to reply quickly to the last comment that Mike Crowley said. It is not constitutionally protected speech. What is protected is fair debate. The moderator establishes the rules to ensure that there is fair debate and no personal attacks. And that is a prerogative of legislature. The decision that the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts made a year ago applied to public hearings of a select board and absolutely did not apply in any way, shape, or form to legislatures. I've conferred with town council. He's in full agreement with that. So this is ad hominem criticism of individuals and committees on town meeting floor is absolutely not constitutionally protected speech.
May I respond to that? So I'm absolutely not advocating criticism of anybody, and yet the Supreme Judicial Court has rendered an opinion. There is some legal debate within legal circles about whether this decision that was handed down in the Barron case in March of 23 applies to legislatures, of which town meeting is arguably a legislature, but it's not settled law. And regardless of whether it's settled law or not, there is a constitutional principle enshrined in 2 articles of the Massachusetts Constitution that I am a believer that we have to honor, whether they specifically apply to town meeting or not, because our residents are entitled to have and offer criticism of their town government. That's part of what being involved in town meeting should be about, that people are entitled to speak their opinions.
Of course, they're entitled to speak their opinions. They're not entitled to attack individuals and committees. And that is not enshrined in the Massachusetts Constitution. And as long as I am town moderator, I will continue to do what I've done for 16 years. And that is to say we can have vigorous debate, criticize others' opinions. Absolutely. That's the way to debate on town meeting, not to criticize individuals personally and no ad hominem attacks.
Well, you keep speaking of attacks, Mike, and I'm not advocating attacks. And frankly, I would not have any tolerance for attacks.
Good.
But criticism is constitutionally protected speech in public meetings, and I would intend to apply that principle to town meetings.
Okay, let's move on to the next question, which is actually related. So part of moderating town meeting is going to be de-escalating situations. So I'm actually going to ask you if you can describe an instance in which you have had to successfully de-escalate a situation, a conflict. So we'll start with you.
Well, so first of all, I will say this. I have not chaired a 300-person meeting before. And frankly, few people have who are not town moderators. And so there is some, if that was an absolute necessity, then we would never have any new town meeting moderators. But frankly, in my previous government experience, I used to work with the Office of Management and Budget in Washington, D.C. I spent much of my career there doing policy work and budget-related work. And I chaired many contentious and large meetings with agencies in which, frankly, people come with a variety of different thoughts and ideas, and sometimes people get angry. And I feel that I was quite successful in calming people down and trying to stick to what the agenda is. We have a common purpose, we have a common goal. Let's try to stick with the agenda. And frankly, town meeting, I think, operates the same way. We have to stay on track and not allow town meeting to be derailed.
That's a very important question, Julie. Town meeting takes enormous amount of preparation. I started a whole planning process when I became town moderator. Literally probably 100 hours of planning. Some of that is routine, but a lot of it is thinking about just the question you raise. Where is it likely that some individual talking at town meeting is going to veer off the tracks in the sense of public criticism or attack, so forth? And I think long and hard in advance about where those might be. There are always surprises, but lots of times I've anticipated. What I try to do is initially suggest to the person, hey, you're moving off track, come back. Usually that works. And that allows us to continue in a civil, fair discourse. It doesn't always work. And there have been a handful of occasions in my 16 years where it's become more contentious. But the job of a moderator is an art form. It's very challenging. My whole career, I did public speaking, and I chaired meetings after meetings after meetings. Managing town meeting is the hardest thing I've ever had to do in the public sphere. And it is an art form because you're always going to get challenges that are unexpected. And your responsibility as a moderator is to try to keep the debate going forward and not become the issue yourself. So I'm glad you asked that question because it's something that I've worked very hard at over the years and I think been largely successful.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the other sort of aspect of being a moderator. So I guess we can ask, how have you been ensuring that committees are appointed in a fair and effective way? And how would you in the future do that?
Do I start?
Sure, you can start.
So yeah, that's, I mean, 90% of moderator's job is planning and conducting town meeting. The other 10% is critically important. And that's the appointment of a handful of committees. These committees, the Warrant Committee, Capital Budget Committee, report to town meeting as the legislative body. So that's why the moderator appoints them. I go through an elaborate process, an elaborate, open and transparent and public process, and then a vetting process in terms of identifying candidates for the Warrant Committee. So I'm very public at first. So for example, when the Library Building Committee passed town meeting, I announced publicly to town meeting, please, anybody who wants to serve on this building committee, contact me at mike.j.widmer@gmail.com. Public, and then giving my cell as well. And then you get people who do volunteer. I reach out then to town leaders, to the school folks, to community activists, and the bloggers, trying to elicit ideas in individual. When they volunteer, or when somebody suggests them, I reach out and then I sit down with them and we have conversation. Mike mentioned earlier that I had appointed him to the Warrant Committee. He, I think, sent me his resume. We sat down and had coffee, I think twice, and that's sort of what I do. And I see whether there's a fit. And the fit and the warrant committee, for example, is are they going to be, you want a range of expertise, a range of experiences, and a range of ideologies. And can those individuals come together and work as a unit in order to get the job done? So that's the process I go through. I'm very proud of a couple of things. One, that you had the select board here a few moments ago. Two of those three members I appointed Mike Crowley, and I appointed the most recent departure from the Board of Selectmen, Adam Dash, to the warrant committee. And finally, my most recent 6 appointments are a cross-section, diverse cross-section of Belmont. 5 of them have children in the public schools, and the 6th has a grandchildren in the public schools. And one of them is BPAC, your treasurer of the Pan-Asian Coalition. So I have focused on diversity in all my appointments, and I've been made considerable success.
Thank you. I'll let you go a little bit over to.
All right. So, I've thought a lot about this when, when the select board or the school committee, these are 2 bodies that both appoint people to town committees. When they do this, there is a public discussion that takes place in a meeting governed by open meeting law that the public is privy to, in which people can hear about the interests of candidates for town meetings. For town committees. They can hear something about the qualifications that these people bring, and they can hear some discussion take place on the respective bodies, the select board or the school committee, about these potential appointments as they're made. And I think that's important. I think it's a kind of transparency that I think builds more confidence in our town committees. And I'm not saying there's anything nefarious about the current process for the moderator appointed committees. And I do appreciate the process that Mike Whitmer goes through in vetting candidates for his committees. But I would like to form a moderators advisory committee composed of town meeting members who could meet under open meeting law and serve as that body in which we could have some public discussion about appointees before they're actually made to the moderator appointed committees. I think this would be helpful, and it's something that I plan to do.
Jen, are there any questions on the?
So there is one follow-up question on the earlier debate, and I'm not sure if it's already answered.
You mean of the moderators?
For the moderator.
For the moderator.
For the moderator, or specifically when we were talking about civil debates on whether or not criticizing the work of town committees or elected official is considered to be civil. Not attacking people, but specifically on the work that they have done. Would you consider that to be available for town meeting debates?
Okay. Can also, yeah, okay. Can we criticize the work of committees?
Well, it depends totally on the context and the motion before town meeting. Because that's the issue, confining discussion to the motion. It's going beyond the motion that we're discussing where this becomes germane. So as a general matter, the issue at hand the motion should be debated on the content of the motion, the arguments for the motion. So Mr. Crowley had a motion at the town meeting last June. do we give additional money for special ed to the schools? Question is debating on the merit of that, not on the role or attitude or work of a committee. That is outside the scope of that discussion. We haven't talked tonight about scope. Scope is a critical element. I mentioned art form. A critical element of moderator's role is to keep discussion within scope. And criticizing committees when you're discussing a specific motion is beyond the scope of that discussion.
So in general, I agree with what Mike just said, with the exception that, you know, if someone offers a criticism of a committee or a town board or town official as part of their arguments on the merits of a motion, I have no difficulty with allowing that person to voice their concerns. I think that is something that is fundamental to citizens' rights in Massachusetts, including the rights of town meeting members to be able to voice concerns about their town government in the context of discussion and debate at town meeting. So, you know, I think it's important to allow people to voice their opinions as part of that discussion. And I would aim to protect people's rights to, or town meeting members' rights to offer such opinions. If they are contextually appropriate to the motion, of course.
Any questions here?
Well, I want to ask the same question as I asked earlier, which is how do you improve communication or soliciting feedback from the Asian or non-voting population? For example, would you be open to non-resident voting or non-resident members of town meeting or non-citizen member to town meeting or non-citizen member to appointed committees?
So I'm open to non-citizen members of committees and town meeting. I think that we probably need changes to bylaws in order for that to take place. But at the same time, you know, it's something that I would support. I do feel that all of our residents, you know, whether they are citizens or not, deserve the same rights to participate in their local government as much as possible. And I would like to say this too, that part of my goal as a town moderator would be to work with community organizations like the Belmont Pan-Asian Coalition and the Belmont Chinese American Association to do outreach to Asian Americans in the community. And you know, if we have some change in bylaws that allows non-citizens to participate, you know, Asian residents of the community, even if they're not American.
And I just want to interject before you start that non-citizens can be appointed and participate in boards and committees. They just can't currently be on town meeting.
Yeah, I wasn't certain of that.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. In one way or another, my whole career has been committed to diversity. I touched on that in my opening remarks. Mike talked about his family. I have so I'll talk about mine. I have a Chinese daughter-in-law. I have two Chinese American grandchildren. I have an Indian American sister-in-law. I have an indigenous granddaughter. And I love them all. And I have done, and I will continue to do everything in my power to expand the rights and participation of diverse populations. And one of the great things that's happened in Belmont in the last 15 years in particular is the growth of diverse ethnic groups and populations. And when Gene and I first went into town meeting, it was all white male old guys. Now I've become old and Mike's become old.
We both have gray hair.
Yeah, and we both have gray, and I don't have much. But it is a very different, town meeting's a very different body today. Belmont's a very different community today. And so I will continue to do, if I'm reelected, everything I can to expand the diversity.
One more question from the public.
Okay.
Mark, feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, I had a question to both moderator candidates. How do they plan to use their committee appointments to drive more sustainable development for the town, particularly development in terms of attracting attracting businesses to the town and attracting commercial development? Thank you.
See, who went first before?
I think I did.
Yeah, well, yeah, this issue has come up in the campaign and it's a bit misleading. The moderator appoints just a handful of committees. The warrant committee and the capital budget committee are the two main committees, and building committees. The warrant committee's role is to develop bits of hours it takes for each individual to develop the town's budget. They meet in subcommittee, as Mike knows, he did it, and I did it. We meet with subcommittees of the town, schools, public works, police, whatever, meetings of the full warrant committee, and ultimately produce a budget document of maybe 75 pages. It's a huge amount of work. That is the major role of the warrant committee. Economic development is the role of the board of the select board. Now, there are financial elements to things that the warrant committee does, but the warrant committee is not responsible for economic development. And so that is a misleading notion that has been in this campaign. In terms of appointments, the issue, as I've said earlier, is to identify expertise and backgrounds and skills and ideologies and have a balance so that the product that is produced by the warrant committee can be a teamwork effort that pulls on all of these skills and diverse backgrounds. Thank you.
Mike?
Well, I have a slightly different take on things. First of all, apart from the warrant committee, I feel that we need almost a Manhattan Project-like effort when it comes to approaching Belmont's need for commercial development. Our need is absolute, and we cannot dig our way out of our financial problems without concerted effort on the part of multiple bodies in this town to change our direction. And when it comes to the warrant committee has such an important role when it comes to financial issues and advising the town on financial issues. And I'm in complete agreement with Mike that the warrant committee does not do commercial development. And I don't think that should be an issue in the campaign. But the role I do see for the warrant committee and ultimately the role that I'd be thinking about as I think about warrant committee appointments is that we need to have this committee spending some time on the revenue side of the budget and doing analytical work that can help the town when it comes to the need to expand our revenue. And in terms of commercial development, I can see a number of things that the warrant committee can do. The warrant committee can do analysis of comparable communities, looking at what they do with respect to commercial development. You know, what do they budget? What kind of effort do they allot to commercial development? You know, what are the factors that perhaps make them more successful or less successful? This all has impact in terms of our town's finances and is part of the warrant committee's financial advisory role.
Okay. Are there any other questions that people here have, or?
That's all we have.
That's all we have?
Yes.
Yes, it is past the time. So maybe we should have our closing statements and then we'll wrap up. So Michael.
Right.
First. 2 minutes.
So, yes, thank you. Very.
I'll set it for 1.5.
Okay.
When you hear it, you have 30 seconds to go. How's that? Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for hosting this evening. It's a real privilege to be here. I've served Belmont for a long time, and it's been a labor of love. You know, when I became moderator, I knew I would enjoy it, and I worked hard at it, but it has become a real honor to serve the citizens of Belmont. And I've worked very, very hard at it. I'm running for re-election for my final year. I announced that when I submitted my papers. And I did that for 2 reasons. First, because of the issues that are coming before town meeting this year are going to be very, very divisive and complicated. And they are going to, like the MBTA zoning law, they are going to require a moderator with experience to handle the kind of the amendments that will come forward and the divisiveness that will come forward. So they will require that experience. I have overseen 102 town meetings. I can't believe it, but that kind of experience will be essential. The other reason I announced that I was going to run 1 more year is to allow for an orderly transition, so to speak, give advance notice to the public, and then we could have a broad community discussion about succeeding me and what it would take to be a good moderator. Perfectly appropriate for Mike Crowley to throw his hat in the ring. And we've had this debate tonight, some similarities and clearly some differences about handling town meeting. If I'm reelected, I am going to do what I've done for 16 years. I am going to oversee a fair and civil debate of contentious issues. I'm going to put enormous effort into the planning, and I'm going to do what I've done all along, and that is give extensive communications to town meeting members in advance. We haven't talked about that tonight. That has been a key thing that I have done, and that has improved the quality of the debate at town meeting because town meeting members understand. I am deeply committed to fair and civil debate, and I will absolutely continue to draw the line on ad hominem and personal attacks on individuals and committees, which would quickly descend into chaos on town meeting floor. There is too much at stake in town meeting and in our legislative body, our democracy, to do anything else. I'm Michael Widmer. I ask for your vote on April 2nd. Thank you.
We'll give you extra time too.
All right. Well, so I'm realizing that if Mike has chaired 100 meetings, I've been there for at least half of them, which has contributed to the gray hair. So why am I running for office? Why have I run for any office? You know, I'm not seeking any kind of, I'm not a glory hound. I'm not seeking any kind of personal attention. And in fact, you know, I have to tell you that I have to push myself to go out and knock on doors. Because honestly, I am a shy person by nature. And so, you know, reaching out to others is something, if you're a shy person, that can be difficult. But at the same time, I am a firm believer that community doesn't stop at the front door. You know, I love my house and I like living in Belmont. And, you know, if my wife ever talks about, maybe we should move because, you know, this isn't right, or, you know, she's working more in New York these days. You know, I keep thinking about, I like this house. I like my backyard. I like the rabbits that are hopping around back there. I like the fox that was in my front yard the other day. But I want to give something back to this community that I really enjoy. And I do want to change the focus of the job a little bit of town moderator. I do want to be engaging in more extensive outreach and education, working with community groups to get more people running for town meeting to ensure that we have a truly democratic process and that town meeting, when it votes, no matter what the issue is, whether it's, you know, bylaw changes, whether it's zoning bylaws, whether it's the budget, that ultimately town meeting, the result of town meeting is something that the community can understand and accept.
Thank you. Thanks to you both.
Thank you.